Starting. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MR Podcast. The MR Podcast is available on all mainstream radio platforms. Make sure you follow or subscribe to never miss any of our many episodes. In today's special episode, we have the guest Tamara Houston, and we will be talking about addressing mental health with Tamara Houston and why she is inspired to mentor the lives of people. As well, we will be focusing on self-care. So we have a few topics in there that we will be discussing. Today's wonderful guest is a wife, mother, and business owner. She started from what she describes as meager beginnings. And despite that, she has been able to grow her practice from a solo practice to a group practice. As well, she has been awarded an ACHI award for mentorship. Her personal passion is working with women that desire to go into business and speaking about self-care, which we will be doing a lot today, or what she also refers to as slowing down. That is so important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So this episode today will be for everyone really that is women and men. The major topics we will cover includes addressing mental health, self-care, and how I guess Tamara Houston views her mentorship work with women. I recommend this episode for us all because mental health, self-care, and mentorship are very important topics of discussion and conversation. Do you ever think about how the world needs more people with a mentor mentality? People of all kinds and backgrounds that are willing to care unselfishly about other people, support people, teach people, and serve people. Well, the truth is, as human beings, we all have a potential and purpose that matters. Their potential and purpose extends to our relationships with other human beings. As the founder of Mentorship Revolution, I believe that being a mentor is not just a career, but in actuality, it is a person that is willing to make intentional choices, intentional sacrifices, and contribute to the world and environment through intentional actions and living. Once we learn as human beings to nurture and encourage the purpose we have as individuals, we begin to understand that we can do the same and help others. This is what I define as mentorship. Right now, if you are still wondering what this podcast holds or why this podcast should even be relevant to you, I will ease your mind today by informing you that this podcast will be juicy and full of worthy news and information. The guests on this podcast will be original, unique, and experienced, so please stay tuned. Okay, so today's wonderful guest is Mrs. Tamira Houston, and I'm very honored to have her on the MR Podcast. Welcome to the MR Podcast, Tamira.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful Sunday. I don't know how it is where you are, but it's nice out, so I can see the trees blowing and the sun out.
It's beautiful. It is. Turn you up. Okay. So, Tamira, I want to make sure, am I addressing you the way you normally are addressed? Like, is it fine if I say Mrs. How would you like for me to kind of like?
That's not Tamara. Tamara.
Okay, Tamara. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So as Tamara said, today is a very beautiful morning, and it happens to be a Sunday, so that's even better. So today we're going to focus on a few things such as mental health and self-care, and we're going to actually pull in both of those topics to kind of merge them. And as well, we will discuss mentorship. These are all great topics to talk about, and I know like everyone would like want to hear about those. So today, Tamira, I would like to hear what you have to say about mental health and self-care. And as well, I would like to know, what do you think about your work and service as a mentor, and what inspires you to do that work?
Wow. So, okay, I guess I'll start with the mental health piece, like being a clinician, um, clinician therapist, social worker, whatever, but serving in that capacity, of course, I definitely see the connection between mental health and self-care.
Yeah.
And probably about a year ago, as a matter of fact, I think it was this week, a year ago,
Okay.
first time I did a presentation on like identifying the priority, which was about viewing self-care in terms of a holistic approach, and not just, and holistic means like all of your parts, not just the physical.
Okay.
And kind of moving away from the medical model. And the medical model being like, you get sick, you go to the doctor, they give you that kind of thing. And it's not that there aren't other pieces that are being brought into the assessment of ourselves. So I'm not saying that we came a long way in terms of medicine. But I'll just share a story for me. It's why that became so important is because I got my training really in doing hospice work. And it was I was working in hospice that was affiliated with the hospital. And so the hospital, we would have to do like these annual checkups, go and get our numbers checked. So blood pressure, weight, all that stuff. And I remember, this one particular year, I go over to the hospital, I get all this stuff done. And a few weeks later, I get a report. And the only thing that stuck out to me in the report is that it said I was obese.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And I'm sure that I was. So I am not discounting that at all, because at the time, I think I was going through this phase where I was drinking like McDonald's sweet teas every morning. That's when they first.
Lord.
So, I was hitting up McDonald's every morning. Have my, my large sweet tea. So, there's nothing but sugar.
Mm-hmm.
I had, added on a few pounds, but I think later on what really struck me about, I guess, my feeling about the results is that I thought about the area that I worked in, where hospice, our business is death and helping people have a good quality of life until their death, And so there would be times that I was new to hospice. So during that 8 years, that was my first experience with hospice. But so I remember thinking like, well, man, I'm new to hospice, and there would be weeks where you would go into the office and I could see, several new clients that came onto hospice. And we would have like this whiteboard, and on the whiteboard, it would have the admissions, the discharges, meaning like these people discharged alive, so they came off the program, or the deaths. And I remember one particular week, I had like 5 to 7 new clients come on, and by that Friday, all of them had died. And, that's the nature of hospice. So it's to be expected. But I did think, well, why, like, is there not a question about, well, how are you doing mentally? How are you doing emotionally? It was more about the number. Like, is my blood pressure okay? Is my weight okay? And all of those things are important for sure.
Yeah, they are.
I just felt like we were missing such a huge piece there. And so that is what really planted the seed for me. And starting to think about and focus on my own self-care and the pieces that I was lacking in and I needed to work on. And then, of course, when I got into practice, I primarily, my caseload is mostly women, has always been since I've been in practice. But, women, we have almost a kind of conditioning in society where we take on a lot, we take on other people's stuff, somebody we pick it up and we try to do everything right. Mm-hmm. And in working with some of my clients over the years, things I would point out is when I would ask them like, well, what about you? what's important to you? What do you do for self-care? Like, I would get these looks like it was just a foreign concept for them to be a priority. Like,
right.
It was my children, my partner, my job. I would hear those things in terms of priority, but then when I would ask, well, like, but what are you doing for you? How are you refueling? Because everything that you're telling me is about you giving, but not how you're refueling. And so that just became like a huge part of my work in mental health, is focusing on that self-care piece. And while it may seem like a small concept, I think what society conditions us to is, when we think about self-care, we think about going out spending money. We're going to the nice restaurant, we're getting our hair done, we're, getting a massage, and all of those things are wonderful. So I like them too. I'm not saying that, but it's like, what are the everyday things that you are doing to make sure that you are showing up well in spaces, and to the point where you can give to people, but you're not giving to the point where you're empty, that you still have enough to be able to take care of yourself and are not just constantly pouring out into other people. So I think a huge piece of what I like to focus on in terms of self-care is how people are doing mentally and incorporating that into their self-care practices, because that's like really important. And as far as the mentorship piece, I think just over the years, like how that became really important to me is really probably just through building my business. I think people that I thought, would show up for me and offer assistance in a way. And I'm not always talking about free, like giving things away for free, but, being a support. When that didn't happen, like I really felt some kind of way about it. And that was part of my own growth, me looking at myself and kind of figuring out, well, how do I want people to feel? How do I want people to receive in my company?
Right.
And thinking about, building business, or just being a better person.
Yeah.
Like, I have to offer to people that doesn't feel like they're having to beg and plead me for something. So what happened over time is, me, as I was building my business, there were things that I intentionally took on and said, well, I'm going to learn it first, and I'm going to learn the ins and outs of it first before I dealt with anybody. And once I got to a place that I could do that, I was actually able to start a second business. So I have a consulting business as well. So that's where and it's primarily in private practice. I work with women that are in startup private practice or expansion. And a number of different things there. But within that, I also offer free mentorship slots. And that's important to me to balance. It's my way of giving back. But I think it helps to balance this idea of, I have invested and learned a skill. And because of that, it's a way for me to bring in a second stream of income. But there are also people who can't afford it. There are also people who just want to, ask a question here or there. And everything doesn't have to be about competition. Well, for me, nothing really, it doesn't have to be about competition at all. There's enough out here for everybody. And I don't want it to be like every time someone asks me something, they're feeling like, okay, well, I'm going to have to pay you for asking, a question. I think it's more so about teaching people where to go to find the information. I may not have the time to sit down and tell you all the ins and outs, but I can definitely point you in the right direction for you to be able to learn the things that you need to learn. So that's kind of how I balance the two. I've been able to create two different businesses, one focused on the mental health piece and self-care, and one focused on like mentorship and being able to give back to people.
So is Renewal Life Counseling, is that one of them? One of your businesses, Renewal Life Counseling?
Yeah, Renewal Life Counseling is the group mental health practice.
Okay. And your consultant mentorship, that one is named?
Houston Consulting.
Houston Consulting. Okay. Okay. So, well, me myself, I'm currently in school in undergrad, and I'm majoring in psychology. So,
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
yeah. So I was going to ask, what do you think that people like me and others need to know as we enter the field of mental health? What should we be preparing for in these years where we're still like entry level? We haven't really got full blown involved, and what are we expected to contribute to the mental health field if we were to be committed?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, is to have some kind of idea of where it is that you're wanting to go in the particular field. I mean, I think that makes a difference in whether you're focused in psychology. My background is in social work, and
Okay.
this is why I chose social work. And then there's also the counseling track as well.
Okay.
But I think just kind of looking to see what the job outlooks are.
Okay.
Get a lot of phone calls from people, from students rather, that are, kind of in this phase where they're getting a lot of information from people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't make."
Yeah, that's where I'm at, kind of.
You're not going to be able to make any money and all that kind of stuff. I said, first, you have to think about like who the messenger is, right? Are they in the field?
Yeah.
Somebody that's just offering unsolicited advice, and they don't necessarily have
Yeah.
in that particular area. Like, I think it's important for you to do your homework outside of your homework in class, meaning, we
Mm-hmm.
kind of think about, like, am I interested in working with children?
Yeah.
Do I want to do couples work? Am I wanting to do research? Because that's going to determine how far you need to go in terms of your academic, aspect of your career. So
Yeah.
I think just doing the work right now to kind of figure out what will my path be. Maybe even coming up with a plan B as well. Like, if it doesn't work out, this way, this will be another avenue that I can go down. I think that's really important. One thing I hate is for people to waste money and waste time. So I mean, even though I have two successful businesses, had I had that level of maturity and somebody giving me advice back then, I definitely probably would have made some different decisions. And
Okay.
waited so long to get into private practice. To be quite honest with you, I would have taken a different path. But hindsight is 2020. I think having that experience puts me in a place where I can say this to somebody like you. Make sure you do your homework now. So I think that's really important.
Okay.
I think too, with everything that's going on right now, I say to even, I provide clinical supervision, that I think the world is wide open in terms of things that you're going to be able to do in terms of the mental health aspect and even the mentorship aspect. On the mental health side, this is like a really, this is a new time for many of us, parents. We're having to now make decisions about, are we, sending our kids back to school? Are we going to do virtual? Are we going to homeschool? Just going to be able to work from home, not work from home? Like, people are just facing a lot of different decisions about what their life is going to look like. And surely in 2019, I was not thinking that this was going to be our reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For what I was going to do in 2020. And those plans have been sidetracked. But being able to pivot, and that's not easy for everybody to be able to pivot. And it for some people, able to do it quickly, and for others, it takes more time for them to be able to do it. So I think that just kind of brings up a lot of different opportunities for people, that, you don't necessarily have to go the clinical route. You can go the coaching route. I think there's many more opportunities from not having to look at paying for brick and mortar, but doing things virtually.
Yeah, there are.
Webinar, you know what I mean? There's just so much stuff that I think is open right now. So you have that in terms of just kind of coping with life transitions and adjustments. That's one piece. And then, right after the onset of COVID in the U.S., then you have this racial pandemic that has came up. And I mean, hey, that is alive and well. I think it's been alive and well. It's just, you know, of course, technology.
It was brewing under the surface. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's capturing more stuff. And then that coupled with the fact that people are at home. You know what I mean? You don't have a whole lot to do but be at home. You know what I mean? Be on social media more. So you're seeing more of the things that are going on.
Right.
Disparities and just racial injustices and stuff, and how people are taking all of this in, and behavior wise how they are reacting to these things. So and then, you know, now they're talking about the third pandemic being like the mental health pandemic. I definitely see that in my practice where things slow down because people are just trying to figure out life, like what are we doing, you know what I mean? And either waiting for the other shoe to drop or just kind of like, let me just gain some control over what I do have and pivot or, you know, figure out some other kind of plan. And now that you know, people are, I think in a space where they are accepting that this is our new norm, but some of that it's brought up a lot of new issues with relationships. We're seeing, you know, a rise, sure, with things like substance abuse and domestic violence, you know, child abuse, and you know, those things that have already been present, but they are just being exacerbated by the pandemics that we are right now. So I personally feel like I'm, you know, really waiting to see what the younger generations are going to do. And I think you have more resources at hand in terms of not having to search so much for what the issues are. The issues are in our face.
Right.
They're everywhere. They're on social media. You turn on the news. You can't, you know, turn on almost anything without seeing what the new issues are just across the nation, across the world. And so I think that's going to be huge. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for research. I'm not a researcher by any means, but I think if that's your judge, like there's opportunities for that. Whether or not you wanted to pursue a PhD or not, you know, that's another aspect of it. But there's going to be many opportunities to research and just kind of do a compare and contrast of how we used to cope, how we're coping now, and what are some of the new behaviors or more common behaviors that we're seeing in terms of how people are dealing with this world right now, the way it is.
Right. So Tamara, I have the question of, as far as when you're going into the field of psychiatry or being a therapist, do you think that would you recommend going up to your PhD or master's? I know, like the bachelor's, you know, getting my bachelor's degree, I am going to take a gap year. So once I get my bachelor's, I'm taking a gap year. But like, what do you recommend for those like going into that field? Like, because you can agree that there are limited opportunities when you stop at your bachelor's.
I absolutely. Not that there aren't opportunities, but they are much more limited. Now, I graduated from grad school in December 2002.
Okay.
And it was clear to me, not grad school, undergrad, if I said grad school, undergrad in 2002, December 2002. And it was really clear to me then that in terms of what I was aspiring to do then, in terms of my bachelor's was not going to cut it. Like what the bachelor's used to be able to get is, I think, no more. So it's definitely, I would encourage pursuing a master's degree, and depending on what your undergrad is in, there's, you know, 2-year programs, there's advanced standing programs. So like if you have your undergrad, your bachelor's in social work, then you can apply to an advanced standing program for your master's, which is only going to take you a year, versus like me, my undergrad was in child and family studies, which had many of the components of a first year MSW program. But because it wasn't a social work degree, I did the year program.
Right.
So that's made a lot of difference as well. And then depending upon what you're wanting to do, like in social work, a master's is kind of considered like a terminal degree, which means I can do everything pretty much with my master's degree as I could with a PhD outside of getting tenured. So I can still teach, but, more than likely on an adjunct level. So if you're that is really what you want to be in academia, then, I would encourage PhD or doctorate for that. If you're wanting to do, more research, I would, encourage the PhD or doctorate. From the psychology standpoint, I would definitely recommend pursuing a PhD because particularly when you're thinking about going into private practice, private practice and you are accepting insurance. So you have to think, what is the minimum requirement to be considered a clinician based off of the insurance fee schedule? So the fee schedule is just how you get paid.
Okay.
It's either going to be a doctorate or a psychiatry or psychology degree with a doctorate or PhD or master's level, and that's normally going to be your social work, your counseling, or your marriage and family therapy, that you're licensed on that level, which means that you have your master's degree and then licensure. Or for some of the programs, it's backwards. But either way, you have a master's degree and you're licensed on that level, and then your bachelor's. And from a clinical standpoint, you cannot practice independently with a bachelor's degree. You have to have either the master's or the PhD doctorate or MD, depending on what you going down the road. So so those are things kind of going back to my point about like what do you recommend in terms of preparing? That's what I would say. Like, if you're in psychology, if you're in social work, and you're thinking about, okay, well, I want to teach, or I want to be able to do testing, or I'm thinking about doing forensics work, like, you need to know what all is going to be required. You have to have the degree, what type of licensure, what type of certifications do you need, will you have to pursue additional education, how far will you have to go, able to get to the place that you want to be, to have the career that you want.
Right. So, as well, so moving forward in the conversation, we can now discuss mental health a little bit more in depth. So, so mental health, as we all know, is defined as our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Psychiatry.org says that mental health is the foundation for emotions, thinking, communication, learning, resilience, and self-esteem. And whether we realize it or not, it is also key to relationships, personal and emotional well-being, and contributing to community or society. So what I think is really interesting, Tamara, is how we've seen the conversation of mental health and how it has evolved within the last few decades. So from your experience, since you are actually in the field and I'm still a college student, so like, how have you seen that happen? How have you seen the media and the way that it's viewed, mental health, how it's being talked about more openly? Do you feel that way?
I definitely being talked about more openly, but I also feel like we have a long way to go still.
Okay.
And I say that just because I think as a society, we have just been conditioned to not talk about our emotions or take ownership of that or acknowledge that in terms of how we are just showing up in the world. That the focus has been on work, it has been on how you're doing physically, and maybe even like the spiritual aspect. I'm in South Carolina, which is in the Bible Belt, so
okay, yeah,
that's huge here. every block, you know what I mean? I could pass like 10 churches if I'm going downtown from my house.
And I'm in North Carolina, so that's like
okay. So and that's in any direction. So it's, you know, I think some of the things that come up for people that I have seen in practice is kind of struggling with guilt and shame around acknowledging mental health issues, or just the acknowledgement that just something isn't right. You know what I mean? We don't always have to. I try to talk to people on a level that they understand. So I'm not always going to go into, you know, using all the clinical terminology and all that kind of stuff. I think it's very important to educate people about what it is that they're dealing with. Some of the education piece, there's healing in that, just to know that, you know, you're not quote unquote crazy or whatever, that there is a thing. You know what I mean? Like if I was having some, you know, heart palpitations or, you know, something like that, and I go to the doctor, like the doctor over time is going to be like, okay, well, maybe we need to do a scan, we need to do a stress test or something like that, because they're wanting to get a diagnosis to match that particular symptom. And in focusing on mental health, it's no different. You know, at the symptoms, and we're trying to match that up with a particular diagnosis so that you can have an understanding about what it is that you are dealing with, and that's going to drive the treatment plan, and probably the frequency of the treatment plan as well, in terms of how often you need to come in for sessions and the homework that you'll need to do and all of that stuff. So I think in going back to like just the media and the society piece, is there's just a lot of conditioning around not acknowledging mental health. Again, you have the struggle. I don't know if I finished my thought about that. Guilt and shame related to seeing a provider about mental health issues, and how that may correlate, or for some not correlate, with their spiritual piece. Like just feeling bad about, well, I should just be able to pray about this, or, you know, I should be able to talk to my pastor, or, you know, somebody else in the church or whatever. And, you know, my response to that is what I do is just another resource for you. It's just something else for you to add in your toolbox. Nobody is because you see a therapist that you have to be in therapy for the rest of your life. Okay. You know, it's not that kind of thing. It's just there are times that we're not doing well, and it's just like, if you weren't doing well physically, you would go to a doctor. So why not do the same thing when it comes to your mental health? And it may just be that you just need booster or maintenance sessions, just to kind of, you know, you got the tools that you need, but maybe you hit hard times and you're struggling a little bit, you come back in for a few sessions, and then it can work that way as well. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you receive mental health services. But I don't think that's always conveyed in media. I don't think that's always conveyed in what people tell us who are ignorant to it for a number of different reasons. Either they don't acknowledge their own, or, you know, they're telling people, oh, you shouldn't have to go see a therapist, or just the stigma that going to see a helping professional means that you're crazy or something. There's a lot of misinformation about certain diagnoses. I hear all the time, everybody is bipolar. You know, that's the new thing. Everybody bipolar.
Oh, yeah.
When, you know, people come in and they'll say, well, such and such told me I was bipolar. And I'm like, well, you know, tell me a little bit more about that. Or what makes you think that you are this? Well, I got on Google and I looked this up. And I'm not saying that that's not, you know, I think doing some self-investigation, there's nothing
right
part of the process. We want people to be more insightful so that you can have an awareness when something is off, so that you can get it taken care of. So I think that's important, but you also need to consider the source of information as well.
Okay.
Like, you know, there are now like through NAMI and like Mental Health America, where they have like the assessment tools on there where you can go on and answer questions, and it will give you an indicator of what it is that you may deal with. I would trust a resource like that more so than I would, just kind of going on and just Googling symptoms and saying, well, this is the same thing. Like, check that, but then also check in with a professional so that you can kind of get some confirmation that that's what you're dealing with, and come up with a plan that you can work on to get better in that area. And my work with clients is more so about walking along with you. I'm not dragging you. I'm not forcing you. I'm not going to work harder than you work.
Okay.
None of that. But I mean, all of those things are part of the process and can be addressed. It may be that you thought you were ready to, make some changes, but come to find out you're really not.
Okay.
Or, you know what I mean? Some people are just stuck in a place where I always say there's security and dysfunction, because it's what we are used to. And we may be able to acknowledge that it doesn't feel good, but it's still what we're used to. So I think therapy can help when people are making progress and they kind of backslide into the dysfunction. Then you have a support to hold you accountable and say, well, hey, what is it that we need to tweak so that this doesn't happen again? Or the next time it happens, because surely it will, we go back to the things that we're most comfortable with, that we have the support that's going to say, okay, well, I got you. You know what I mean? I'm here with you. I'm going to support you through this process, and to normalize that it happens all the time. We can think, like, you say you want to lose 15 pounds, right? And you on this workout plan and you doing it and you eating right, and then here come this Snicker bar.
Oh, yeah.
You done ate the Snicker bar, and next thing you know, it's not just one. You eating one every day. You know, it's better if you have an accountability partner that can hold you to, the things that you've committed to. And so that's kind of like that therapeutic relationship that you can have developed with your helping professional is, what's going to be the dynamics of our relationship? How are you going to help me when I'm struggling? And also for the helping professional to say, well, these are the limits to what I can do as well, because we're not friends. I'm a clinician. And so there are boundaries to that. But again, all of that plays into mental health, because that's an issue too. Boundaries is a huge problem when it comes to our mental health and how we take care of ourselves. So,
right.
There's just so many components to it, but I think we can definitely get a skewed, our reality can be skewed or distorted when we are just looking at like social media and television and things in terms of how we are to deal with mental health across the board. There are some good things out there, but I just encourage people to consider the source. It's one thing to just pick up a magazine, just some random, magazine, and pick that up and read something. It's a whole nother level of information when you're looking at peer reviewed research and that's been tested and tested again. That's different. I think many times there are advertisements about medications, right? And then, a person, they'll go in to see their provider and they're like, oh, I saw this medication, I want this.
Okay.
I've seen and I've heard it work both ways, where a client has said to me, I've asked for this, and I've also known the provider to be like, okay, well, if that's what you want, yeah, we'll try that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It works both ways. You just have to you have to be aware and insightful about what's going on with you, and make sure that you are following up with trusted resources.
Right. So, I mean, two disorders that I was particularly interested in was, and I know that you would know this, have you noticed substance abuse and eating disorders? Those are two that I would like to discuss, because I feel like those are ones we see commonly play out. Like, we know about bipolar, schizophrenia, but I think when we look at the average day person, sometimes we ignore the substance abuse and we ignore the eating disorders.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for the sake of transparency, I will say this, and this is another lesson in terms of mentorship. Those are not my specialties. Neither one of those are my specialties, but they definitely show up in practice. So
okay.
You need to work within your scope of expertise. So I am definitely a believer in that. So I won't say a whole lot about either one other than to say this. What I tend to do in my practice when I see that those issues come up, I think this is where we as helping professionals have to really be aware of our own stuff and not feeling like we need to be everything for everybody and refer for a particular issue. So I have in the past had, people come in and eating disorder was one of the issues. And I would say to them during the evaluation, so to go back to I think your question, one is I don't see that a lot in my practice in terms of eating disorder. But when it does happen, I will say to them, of all the things that are going on, this is always my process with people. What are the most important things that you would like to work on? And also sharing with them that eating disorder not being one of my specialties. But I think it's important to have a list of people that you can refer to or other clinicians that you can refer to, deal with issues outside of your area of expertise.
Okay.
What I can work with the client on is saying, okay, well, I can work with you on this and this, but I think, to make sure that you get the best care, that for this particular issue, this can be referred out. And then we discuss amongst, the two of us, because that treatment plan is developed jointly. We can discuss amongst the two of us or how many of us are involved in that session to determine what order are we working on these. So if eating disorder is number one, and I can help provide some insight about, is that symptomatic or is it the cause? So depending on where that lies, that's going to determine if I'm referring you out first or a few sessions to work on something else. I am very blessed, I think, in my practice to have a contractor that her specialty is substance abuse.
Okay.
So one thing, I have that inside connect. So when I have that come up, for me, she would be one of the first people that I would refer to within the practice, or I will consult with her in terms of, okay, this is kind of what the treatment plan is looking like for a particular client. What would you recommend? So I'm looking at her to be the expert on this, to give me advice on how I can best help and guide my client to the best treatment for them. And so I'm very lucky in that way. But I made a decision early on, even though, substance abuse is huge and has definitely been an epidemic for a very long time, that's just not in my wheelhouse.
Right. Yeah.
That's not in my wheelhouse. I kind of honestly, I feel like I would just be going back to school all over again, and I'm not
okay.
at all.
Right. So I know we've mentioned medication. So what do you think about rehabilitation, and what is your experience with rehabilitation and how that works with patients?
Can you expand a little bit more? What do you mean by rehabilitation?
I would say maybe kind of maybe experiencing how that works in the field of mental health is, or the way that it works in the field of recovering maybe.
Okay. Again, I think it goes back to, now this would be for me, and I think, even to be honest with you, even though I said I have an in-house person, I know that in private practice, she also refers to refer out as well. Okay. But we do get a lot of situations where people are either in recovery or have came out of a recovery plan or in some type of program, and both jointly typically work the same as if someone was, say, seeing a psychiatrist for medication management, right, and for therapy. so that kind of coordination of care doesn't necessarily happen with some of the recovery programs. None in my history, to be quite honest with you. Like, it's not like I've had any of those organizations like reach out to me for records or.
Okay.
So if they're in recovery, they typically have a program that they are involved in to some respect. And what typically happens is through that program, our practice will get referrals because there are some underlying issues, and normally a lot of that has to be. And so that's my specialty, is doing trauma work. So I will kind of depend on how much time we have and where the person is in recovery or rehabilitation. That's going to determine where we go as far as the treatment plan. I have a few I guess you like frameworks that I use, where it can be like an 8-week, it can be a 12-week sessions or whatever. And so it again, it just kind of depends on where the client is, and what you don't want to do is force any client to go through and start talking about things that they are not ready to talk about. So in that case, I am really kind of monitor how they are doing with recovery. So even though that may not be the area that I'm focused on in terms of treatment plan, I'm still going to monitor. I'm still going to do, measures about, things like the substance abuse, whether that is, drug, some type of psychotropic medication, or even alcohol use. I'm still going to monitor those things.
Okay.
It's going to have a direct impact on the success of their treatment with me. And I've had, just as many people to work through a program with me as I've had people that have dropped out. Like, once they finish their recovery program, you don't see them anymore. You know what I mean? That happens. And so that may be somebody that just continues to like recycle through the system.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I can kind of say that happens across the board. And there are some like particular diagnoses that I would say I see that happen more with than like somebody that's dealing with just anxiety or depression. You know what I mean? But if I see more like bipolar disorder, I would see more of a start and stop, kind of thing as far as treatment is concerned. That happens quite a bit.
Okay. So, so do you discuss self-care regularly with your patients? Do you discuss that with them, or is
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Every client. Every client.
So how do you, like, for like the average day person, how do you explain to them the importance of self-care? Like, what is the conversation that you all will have?
I would say a lot of that in terms of the illustration that I use is kind of dependent upon what they share with me as far as their history. I try to use examples from their just everyday life to explain what that may look like. But I talk about it, I think in the same sense as I do like the physical care, how, the recommendation is for us to have at least 30 minutes of exercise every day, and how that can be broke up into 3 10-minute, 2 15 minutes, or you can do a full 30-minute stretch, whatever feels good to you. But the importance of self-care primarily, and this is regardless of what the illustration I use to like bring this home, but the importance of self-care is that you can show up better in spaces. That's at home, at work, at church, at wherever they say, they frequent, wherever they say they have a role to play. I use those examples back to them. And I really like some of the work and conversation that Yama Van Zant has had around self-care.
I love her. Yeah.
Person. And I will refer clients quite a bit to an old of her, and when she was doing one of the a spot with Oprah Winfrey, talking here, and she used several different examples in that. She talked about being the strong one in the family. She talked about the aspects. She used a scripture about like your cup runneth over, and how we and how she related that to self-care is like your cup needs to be full, and all of the extra that flows over, the people around you can get 100% of the extra. So like you're 100% full, and then there's extra. So that extra, you can't do anything with it. But like, if I'm not doing well, then that's going to impact how I show up at home with my children and my husband.
Right.
I'm not going to show up as my best self, because if I'm showing up as my best self, they're going to get all of the extra, and I'm not going to be walking around constantly feeling like fatigued and taken advantage of and just worn down. You know what I mean? I will disclose some, and I'll do that here about just, that I adopted, just really simple. And I do this now, even though I'm doing telehealth. I would, whenever I would go into the office, I would sit in my car for about 15 minutes, and I may be on the phone, I may be listening to music or whatever, and sometimes it may be longer than 15 minutes. But what I realized is that I would, go get up, get, myself and the kids ready. I'm dropping them off, and I'm going, and then get to the office, and I got to go in, and I got to immediately start getting ready for the work day. And I was like, by the time I get to I need a break, because I've been flying.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That would be my opportunity to just kind of reset before I go into my office space, so that I can well in my office space. I can collect my thoughts. If there's anything else that's going on that's not related to work, I can kind of put that to rest for a little bit. And you stay in the car, I'll pick you up at 5. I'm not taking those things into work with me. And then I do the same thing when I get home. Like, get home, I, tell my kid, go in the house, go ahead and have your snack or whatever. And at first it would be difficult. Of course, I have, younger kids, so they want to come outside, they're knocking on the door and stuff. And I had them like, this is mommy time. I'm not going into, I need a break from you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is just mommy time. Because when I get in the house and clock into mommy, they don't know, nor do they care about
No, they don't.
That I saw that day, and maybe the trauma that I heard about that day, or the client that maybe I had to refer inpatient. They don't know about those things, and it's not fair to burden them, even though you're not sharing the story, but burdening them emotionally. And myself from them, because I'm still reeling from the things that happened during the day. So I would do that. And so again, I'm doing telehealth, but it ain't nothing for me to go sit out in my car, right in my garage. I would do that in a hot minute. I would go sit, and like a day like today, I would go sit out there. Got a big tree that hangs over my car. Like, it's just nice, you know what I'm saying, to get some fresh air.
Yes.
30 minutes of my day. 30 minutes. So it's not like I'm having to take a whole day. Sometimes a whole day is necessary. Sometimes it's necessary. That's why we go on vacation and stuff. But there are things that we are doing every single day that are important. I also do like gratitude journaling. I'm not a big journaling person personally.
I love journaling. Yeah.
I will do like every day. I'll just write like what was something good that happened for me this day. And if I have thoughts that I need to just kind of get off my brain and just get it into the universe, so I'm not carrying around, like, I'll write those things down too. But I start off with a positive note, so that at the end of the week, today, I will go back to my journal and I will have, 7 things, because I start from last Sunday. I will have 7 things on there that I can look back on and be like, I had some really good things that happened during the week. Because it's amazing how, a couple of bad things can happen, and that will color our entire day, or that will color our entire week. And you know how you ask somebody, well, how you doing? And, oh, it's just been a bad day. It's just been, long, and then, but do you think about, you got up this morning? That didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
You got dressed, you got wherever you went to.
Yeah.
That bad thing, you got there safely and you left. I mean, there's so many good things that happen that we minimize those things and can't.
Because the negative stands out more, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think part of the mental health and self-care piece is bringing people back around to that. It is, and a lot of my work I'm in doing trauma, we're talking about past and healing things from the past day because it's showing up right now. But in the meantime, you still have to, work on showing up well despite those things that happened in the past. Like,
right.
We're alive today in 2020
to
even tell about it. You know what I mean? So let's focus on some positivity as well and figure out what are some practical things that you can do to help you just take care of yourself every single day, because that may have actually contributed to the trauma of feeling so intense or not being able to heal itself, because the result of that trauma is you not feeling worthy enough to take care of yourself. And then people don't even make that connection. Connection that part of the reason why you don't value yourself or you don't prioritize yourself is because this thing happened and it made you feel worthless. So it's really empowering a person to recognize that, hey, you're here. You made a decision to get help. You made a decision to talk to somebody. You made a commitment to do something different than you've ever done before. So give yourself some credit for that.
I think that's extremely important, and I agree with everything that you just said, because those are some challenges that we face in our self-care. So, and as well, like you said, we don't know why we are holding back from taking care of ourselves, or so we have to and as you may have noticed, do you notice that like doesn't it usually take like time for those changes to occur, for those new positive habits?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And this is one thing, homework. So I tell them that at the gate. You're going to get homework. So it's not just going to be us talking for 45 minutes to 60 minutes and then you don't do nothing for the rest of the week. Like, you're going to continue to work. This is what you signed. So I give homework. I do that is because what we do is process. So that means, like, outside of our time together, you need to implement what the things that we talked about, right? So that you can see how you manage, how it feels to you, if it resonates to you, outside of me saying this is a good thing. I can tell you all kind of stuff is good, but if you practice it, if you try it one time and it don't feel good that one time, it's just kind of like, should I continue? Or some people just stop. They just do it at one time and they just stop. And I remind people that, honestly, while the homework is not mandatory, it is part of the healing process, though, so that you can practice a new skill, because you don't need to practice what you've been doing. What you've been doing does not work. And if you're going to continue to do what you've been doing, then you don't need this process. You need it, but you may not be ready for it.
Right.
If you want to do something different, then that's what our work needs to be about, is practicing a new thing. Practice the new thing, and then we
Tamara? Let's see. I don't know what just happened.